I didn't realise, and I'm not sure if there were any serious negotiations between the radical independence people in Glasgow and the Greens as to forming some sort of coherent left-wing united front for the 2016 elections. I think if a party was going to, or a coalition was going to emerge from anywhere, it was going to emerge from Rick, and Rick was going to stand on its own. So I'm pleased that an arrangement was reached with the Scottish Socialist Party. And again, given the insurgent atmosphere in European politics, now much of that sense of insurgency has been soaked up by the SNP, but not all of it. Given that sense of insurgency, I just think it's premature to write them off.
Well, I think, though, that the area you would expect Rise votes to potentially come from, the West Central Belt, the big housing schemes, the deindustrialised towns, the Clydebanks, the Castle Milks, these are the very areas which are just currently madly and passionately in love with the SNP. These are the very areas where the SNP is weighing the vote at the moment. I don't see that there's space for Rise to come in at the left with the way the current polls are sitting. I really don't.
No, actually, the way the current polls are sitting does create some space, because the SNP will win. It looks like they could win every constituency in Scotland. And if polls are consistent between now and May, then the argument is, well, give your second vote to Rise. If you're an SNP supporter who wants to see a more radical edge to the way Scotland is governed under Nicola Sturgeon, then consider giving your vote to a more radical party, your second vote to a more radical party.
Stage left, enter Tommy Sheridan. That's also something we're looking forward to over the next 6 to 8 months.
Well, I've heard reports that he might be considering standing in central Scotland rather than Glasgow or south of Scotland. And if he does that, then again, some space is cleared for Rise. But who knows? I certainly don't have any particular insights into the psychology of Tommy Sheridan. I certainly don't want to.
No, it's not a happy place to be.
But Lanarkshire is where Solidarity are strong. That's where there's been clear Solidarity infiltration of the SNP over in the Lanarkshires. So I'd certainly also heard that Tommy, despite saying he was going to go for Glasgow, might well go to the Lanarkshires where he's less well known and his chances might be greater. But I hope he's completely obliterated, embarrassed and humiliated off the face of the earth and removed from public life forever, because I'm not really a fan.
And on
that, we get that impression, Catherine.
And on that bombshell, so something a little bit sadder, I'm afraid, was that in 2015 we also saw the loss of two very important people on the Scottish scene, Ian Bell and William McIlvanney. I'll start with Jamie here, because I believe you were at the funeral of Ian Bell the other day. What does it mean, the loss of Ian Bell?
Well, yeah, I attended Ian Bell's funeral on Tuesday at Morton Hall in Edinburgh, and it was a very well-judged and understated affair. The great and the good of Scottish journalism turned out to say their goodbyes, and Sean Bell, who I know, Ian's son, spoke incredibly thoughtfully about his dad. I've grown up reading Ian Bell. I've read him since I was about 15, and his writing has framed the way I look at modern Scotland and understand it. So it's going to be incredibly difficult over the coming months and years to get used to not hearing that voice. I'm encouraged by some rumours that a collection of Ian Bell's journalism is going to be put together, which would be terrific, because there really wasn't a finer writer writing regularly in Scotland. I think the Scottish left, and Ian Bell was unapologetically of the Scottish nationalist left, has lost his most eloquent voice, and there's nothing really you can do to replace him. It's that simple. So it was a disheartening and sad note to end the year on.
And Kathleen, any thoughts on Ian Bell?
No, but on William McIlvanney, I felt that when I used to read his literature. In some ways, he reflected back that toxic West of Scotland masculinity in a way that was both sympathetic and empathetic. And every year we lose people, that's the truth. But the reality is there are always new people coming up. There will be new writers, there'll be new people that we can admire. But these are losses, I think, that Scotland will feel.
And Pat?
Sure. I was at the McIlvanney speech that he made in 1992 in the Meadows in Edinburgh, where he shouted up and said, we are a mongrel nation, and we have a mongrel tradition. And that's a phrase that kind of has burrowed through a lot of thinking about Scottish identity ever since he uttered it, because I think it's the kind of that was almost the basis of the position that we took into the referendum, which was that if you're a resident here, that's your right to vote. Rather than being anything to do with ethnos or language or any of the darker elements of nationalist identity. So he's always to be utterly praised for that. It's the nicest aspect of Scotland that you have a top table of speakers at an event, and one of them has to be some flaky writer. I think that's fantastic. I can't put my finger on the novelist in contemporary Scottish letters who would be the generation coming up. I mean, I'd be interested to ask either of you two who you think the McIlvanney equivalent is at the moment amongst writers who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I mean, I wonder whether that's an era of the novelists representing, or the artists representing the nation. Is it changed now? I mean, I can't think of who the names would be that I would cite. I mean, obviously Alan Bissett is the obvious example, but of the stature of McIlvanney, I can't think of who's coming through. It doesn't come to mind for me.
Alan Bissett's still a very young man, and
yes.
I think his novels, will deepen, they will become more serious. I mean, Neil Mackay, his novel about the children growing up in the Northern Ireland, if Neil Mackay starts to reflect perhaps in Scotland, I think Neil Mackay could be a really, really good novelist and one to look out for. But at the moment, he still seems to be writing a lot from his, from his Irish roots rather than from his Scottish base. But, there's every journalist is writing a novel, aren't there? Everybody Meek's writing a novel. So I'm sure there will be more novels. I
mean, James Meek has grazed the Scottish debate. I think he's one of the most amazing novelists. He's also a working journalist. But, I can't think of, maybe James Robertson as well, perhaps. All blokes so far on my list. And I think about Ali Smith, or I think about Kirsten Innes, maybe Kirsten. I mean, but it's that McIlvanney-esque ability or willingness to sort of stand up and write a book of short essays like The Walking Wounded, which is what's still on my shelf at the moment. I mean, the idea of walking wounded as a way to describe, the victims of various waves of development in Scotland and Scottish life is still an example of his genius, his epigrammatic genius. And I would like someone to come along and take up the mantle, man, woman, or dog, I don't care, or robot, or algorithm, whoever it takes.
Well, I'll ask my dog, but I don't think he's got the ability. But okay, so we'll move on from that as well. And suppose a couple more stories, and then we'll draw things to a close. But Memogate. This has been an on-running story throughout the year. Started with a politician lying, shock horror, and it finished with a ruling which kind of said it's all right for a politician to lie, but kind of didn't as well. It was quite complicated. Pete Warrior's writing on it was probably the best here. But I'll go to Pat first.
The bit of it that I liked most was the fact that the suit was raised by a bunch of motivated Scottish citizens, and the suit was funded by a crowdfunding exercise. I mean, I think when you look at the publishing scene, or when you look at the way that Commonweal has managed to gain subscriptions, if you're looking for the health of Scottish civil society, and I think we must hope that one of the consequences of the referendum has been that Scottish citizenship has a lot of energy about it, and that was the best aspect of it for me. To look at the spectacle of Carmichael, getting away with this mendacity, even if it's under a technicality about whether he was making this an aspect of his character in his election campaign literature or not, that was the technicality that he sort of got off of with the judges. He couldn't have been more calumnised or damned in terms of his performance or testimony by the judges, and certainly by the guy who was prosecuting against him. But it's Westminster trousers down, seedy farce all the way down the line. And I mean, a bit like the House of Lords and Kathleen's previous point, I'm very happy to see him look as much a fool as possible. But I did enjoy the fact that it was generated as a people's initiative almost, and I think that's to be supported. Subsequently, there's a model that I hope bolshy Scottish citizens decide to take cases like this and go to the people to get support for it. I hope that happens more and more.
Don't you feel sorry for Alistair Carmichael on a personal level? He's not a bit. No, my mum's shouting no. So obviously there's no sympathy for him in this room. But I don't believe he's a bad person. I mean, and he's completely ruined. He's nobody will take him seriously again. His entire life he will be known as the man that was found by the court to have been a liar. That's a horrible thing for somebody to have to carry around for the rest of their life, to see his career end that way. He should have resigned, though. For him to keep going the way he has shows an arrogance that really doesn't become him. But I must admit, I do feel sorry for him in a slight way, in a personal way, for his family, for his friends who know him to probably be quite a decent guy, you know.
But I also thought nobody was really taking him seriously after the Sturgeon debate, where he was sort of seen asking for help as well. It's been a long time that no one took him seriously. But Jamie, how do you think Alistair Carmichael smells now?
I've thoroughly enjoyed watching the myth of Carmichael just collapse in some farcical fashion. He was introduced to us as a backbench nobody, really, by Nick Clegg when he placed Michael Moore as Scotland secretary, as a bruiser, as someone who was thought to be schooled in the dirtiest sort of way in Westminster politics, and one of the hard guys, London's hard guys, enforcers, and he's been shown repeatedly since then to just be a hopeless, flailing clown of a politician. And I thought that the judgment, the acquittal, as it were, that he received by the judges seemed appropriate. That he was thoroughly disingenuous to the point of being just completely absurd. He's become completely absurd. I have absolutely no sympathy for him. He's going to be amply compensated over the next 5 years.
Yeah, but Jamie, there's something you said there that's really interesting. He was introduced as the hard guy. He was introduced as the bruiser. Do you know what? If our body politics would be far healthier if we didn't think that having hard men and bruisers was a good way to be run. What is so good about being a hard man and a bruiser? And it was the same thing that happened to Jim Murphy, the hard man, the bruiser.
Yep.
People need to get the message that politics has changed and we are no longer interested in politicians who are promoted to us on the grounds that they could probably give us a kicking up a dark alley, you know?
Yeah, I'm not commending. I mean, that's how I remember him being presented and styled. And it's what makes his decline, his spectacular fall, all the more entertaining and gratifying.
And it also puts into relief the support for Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, I think the very fact she embodies a certain idea of not too passionate, pragmatic. Let's deal with the issues. I mean, at least that's the demeanour and the style. So I think watching all these flawed, failed, traditionally mechanistic male politicians tumble like ninepins around about her, I think is another explanation for her charisma at the moment.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on. The only things I've got left here, basically, if you want to talk about them, we can. If you don't, we won't. The Forth Bridge and policing in Scotland. Is it out of control?
Oh, that's
policing in Scotland's not out of control. It's just a media story that's caught on. There's nothing that bad happened, and Steve House was not as bad as everybody's making him out to be. He was superb on issues of domestic violence. But once you've got the idea out there that policing is somehow out of control, then it starts to feed itself, and the stories start to feed itself. I don't think policing in Scotland is remotely out of control, and I don't think it's particularly different from how it was 3 or 4 years ago, to be honest. But so it's a bit of a non-story for me.
I think the issue there is with the football fans. The focus unit of the police, they're extremely heavy-handed, and there are innumerable stories about, basically the police not just being strict with fans, but actually harassing them and turning up at their houses and things like this. And, how's your wife? And saying their names. There's lots and lots of testimonies of this sort of thing going on.
Then these need to be put into the public domain and tested. I mean, I'm not a football fan, and I've never been at a football match recently. I've never experienced the kind of things that you hear about. It doesn't sound good, but I don't think that because of the behaviour of perhaps police in West or Central Scotland, we should necessarily reflect upon that somehow policing as a whole is failing, or, that if we phone 999 now, we won't get a prompt and professional response. It's a difficult situation for the SNP because you can't be seen to undermine the police, but nor can you be seen to control the police. And policing is always very difficult for governments, which is why it's such a great issue for the opposition at the moment.
Pat?
Well, just very briefly, I'd slightly disagree with Kathleen. I think the stop and search rate is far too high, and I think there's an element of the critique